Ever since people began living in communities, in towns, cities, settlements, whatever you want to call them, they've needed ways to defend them. One of the clever ways they figured out to defend these settlements was to pile up rocks and call these rocks walls. These were very effective at keeping people out. Sometimes they would employ the help of wood sharpened into spikes to also keep people out. They would dig trenches, maybe even fill those trenches up with water, call that a moat, and that would also help at defending their settlements. But the urge to take other people's stuff was just as strong as wanting to keep it. Thus, sieges began. In an arm race, people found better ways to get over walls, through trenches, over moats, whatever you needed. People figured it out. In response, people needed to figure out how to defend from sieges. In this video, I would like to discuss with you some of the most unorthodox ways I found to defend your city from sieges. Make sure you watch all the way through as these get crazier and crazier as the list goes on. If I missed any crazy defenses that you guys know about, make sure you let me know down in the comments below, as I'll probably make a future video on more of these ideas. So without any further ado, let's get right into the siege. The first defense method I would like to discuss is a little counterintuitive. One of the most common ways to lay siege was to just starve the defenders out. You'd circle around the city with your boys and not allow any food to come into the cities. Growing food in a densely populated area doesn't work too well, so starving them out was a great option without having to go in and fight. One of the ways the defenders would counteract this was to ride out and meet them, the sally forth. You would think staying behind your walls is what you would want to do, but that doesn't always work. The attackers sometimes would never truly expect that you mad lads would ride out of your walls and meet them head on in a pitched battle. Another thing you could do is sneak out of your walls at night and try to set fire to your opponent's camp or destroy as much of their sieging equipment as possible. Sometimes the best thing to do is not to rely on your defenses and go out and meet them on the offense. The next unorthodox siege defense I would like to talk about comes from a very famous siege when Alexander the Great attacked the city of Tyre. Alexander the Great was the first person to use catapults, ballista, what have you, to try to destroy the walls, not just shoot the defenders on them. In a comical way, one of the best defenses for siege weapons was to fill up sacks with whatever you had on hand and lay them on your walls like big pillows or mattresses to cushion the blows from the mighty weapons. The preferred medium for these sacks would be wool or any kind of animal linen, down feathers, whatever you have. But in the Siege of Tyre, being on an island, well, what was an island, they had plenty of seaweed. The Tyrians would fill up these sacks with wet seaweed and lay them down on the walls and have them sit there as they dribbled down their salt water all over their walls, cushioning the blows from Alexander's machines. Literally making a pillow fort was a great defense against siege weapons. They also noticed that the wet seaweed would extinguish fires. In war, both sides learn lessons. Alexander the Great would employ wet bags of seaweed as an ancient fire extinguisher on his siege towers in the future. Make sure to bring your bags of seaweed the next time you're having a campfire. The next method I would like to discuss is this more specific example from the Siege of Syracuse in 213-212 BC. Romans were attacking the city where the famous inventor Archimedes lived. Archimedes converted what people think was a crane for lifting boxes or heavy rocks on the docks. He converted this crane to lift ships up and out of the water. The Romans, thinking themselves clever, decided to at night attack the city with 60 ships. When they neared the walls, they realized their ships started levitating. Kind of cool having a flying ship, but the problem was they would be dropped upon their other ships. In the darkness, complete confusion ensued. The Romans had no idea how their ships were being picked up and dropped onto one another. We have no proof of this being used, and also if it was this effective, why was it not employed in the future? But Livy the historian says that it in fact happened, so we have to believe him, because who can dispute him? Also, that Archimedes guy was pretty crafty, so I choose to believe it just because it's funny. As we talked about in our earlier example of people sneaking out at night over the walls to fight in the enemy's camp, well, sometimes the attackers would try to sneak over the walls at night to burn down the city or open the gates to let troops in. To prevent this, ancient security systems were devised and used. There would be many things employed for this. Very commonly, dogs were used, as they have a great sense of knowing when someone's about. Other times, a series of ropes would be tied to the walls, so if anyone tried to lay a ladder on it or even climb it with their body, it would cause rocks to fall down, either crushing the person trying to scale the walls or just making enough noise to alert the sentries. Other traps on the walls would include large spiked logs to roll down the walls, causing the same effect, either killing the climber or alerting the sentries. Something interesting, more common in Japanese castles, were things called nightingale floors. Purposely designed wood floors to creak and squeak as much as possible, making it impossible to sneak. Ancient security systems have quite the history, and are a very interesting tale in their own right. Our next impressive defense comes from ancient China, with Cao Cao versus Lu Bu. Here we find Cao Cao defending a city as Lu Bu marches his army to attack. Knowing he is greatly outnumbered, he employs a very clever idea. He opens all the gates, inviting Lu Bu in, and hides his troops out of sight. Lu Bu approaches the city he thought he was going to have to siege, but finds it open, welcoming him into the city. Being wary, he expects a trap. He orders his troops to camp and stay there for the night outside of the city. Upon the next day, finding the city still open and no sign of Cao Cao's troops, he moves his troops in towards the city. Surrounding the city was a dense forest, and here is where Cao Cao's troops were hidden. This surprise attack allowed Lu Bu to be defeated and Cao Cao to seize victory, even though being greatly outnumbered. If something seems too good to be true, it probably is, especially when it comes to taking a city. People don't like to give those up. Used as early as the 9th century BC, tunneling underneath your opponent's walls was a great way to circumvent them. As tunneling became more popular and more expected, counter-tunneling was the defender's best choice. Now you think counter-tunneling would be as simple as digging a tunnel into your attacker's tunnel and fighting them in the underground, as they might not expect you to have troops down there. Or maybe just dig a tunnel underneath their tunnel and collapse it. That's also a good idea. With a little reading, I found some more disturbing tunnel defenses. In a form of ancient chemical warfare, there are reports of Chinese warlords using mugwort, a plant grown in China that causes hallucinations when breathing in the smoke. They would use that to gas out the tunnels and force them to stop digging as they were hallucinating or choking. In a more disgusting version of that, some defenders would boil human feces and pour them into the tunnel, either covering the tunnelers in boiling feces or just causing a smell so foul no man dares go down there. But honestly, the history of tunneling and sapping is quite amazing. If you want to see a full video on that, let me know. Using siege weapons to attack, like the battering ram, makes sense. The defenders have gates and walls that you want to topple over and crumble. So why on earth would the defenders need a battering ram? Well, let me tell you. As a siege tower rolls up to the walls, they get really close, and that's basically just a rolling wall up against your wall. So if the attackers are having fun battering ramming, you might as well do the same. There are many reports of battering rams being placed on walls to smack into siege towers as they rolled up. Imagine you and your lad are inside this tower, this mobile tank filled full of your troops, and you pull up to the wall just to be greeted by a battering ram. These would have the effect of either just rendering the tower so that it couldn't open by destroying the gate that would drop down, all the way up to knocking that tower over. Hopefully you land on a bag of wet seaweed as a cushion as you fall many stories. And here we are to our final story. At the city of Chester. The city of Chester has walls built by the Romans in 100 AD, but the siege we're talking about happened in 908. Scandinavians were laying siege to the city of Chester and were tunneling underneath said walls. As a means of defense, the Chesterans used bees to fill the tunnels and drive the people tunneling out. The city had many beehives as they made mead or just honey in general. If bees were just used as another counter-tunneling technique, why didn't I just put that in with the tunneling? Well, you see, the Scandinavians had to be taught a lesson by bees twice. While sieging a city in Germany, the Scandinavians were heavily armored knights at this point. While they were fighting outside the walls, the Germans decided to throw beehives down at their troops. Surprisingly enough, plate mail and chain mail helped to repel bees, as they're pretty well suited up. The problem is, horses' armor was not that good. As the bees found the horses' flesh, the horses were driven into a frenzy, stampeding over their own troops and running away en masse. This is the second example of bees being a good defensive tool. The examples I have brought before you are just a few of the many that I read about. It is quite amazing the imagination humans can have when they're trying to kill people and stop them from taking their things. If you made it this far into the video, thank you very much. The watch time really helps. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, but more importantly, just share this video with someone. I want to get some engagement going, have a community about sieging. I want to learn more, I want to teach more, I also want to build more siege weapons. And with your help, I can do all of that. But again, thank you for watching. I'll see you later. Siege the day.